The jackhammer started at precisely 8:03 a.m., an unholy roar that shattered the sacred morning quiet of Guliarana Gardens. For Mrs. Anila Khan, this was not merely an inconvenience. It was a sacrilege. Her entire world, meticulously constructed over 35 years, was predicated on order, predictability, and the gentle symphony of gardeners' shears and cooing doves that constituted the society's approved morning soundtrack. This was a sonic assault, a declaration of war against tranquility itself. In her drawing room, where the polished rosewood furniture gleamed and not a single cushion dared to stray from its designated position, Mrs. Khan froze, a delicate teacup of jasmine tea halfway to her lips. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent behind gold-rimmed glasses, narrowed. The vibrations traveled from the manicured lawn, through the foundations of her immaculate house, and up into the very marrow of her bones. It was coming from number 12. Of course, it was. The house that had been sold just last month to that young couple from Karachi. She hadn't even met them properly, had only caught a glimpse of a woman with startlingly bright pink hair, unloading a car packed with abstract art canvases, an ill omen if ever there was one. For a moment she considered the protocol. The proper procedure was to first lodge a verbal complaint with the Society's security office, who would then dispatch a guard to investigate. But Anila Khan was the protocol. As the chairperson of the Residence Committee, a post she had held with unwavering resolve for 15 years, she was the chief architect and guardian of the Society's bylaws. This was not a job for a subordinate. This required the personal touch of the iron fist and the velvet glove. Slipping into her sturdy garden sandals, she strode out onto her veranda. The air, usually fragrant with the scent of roses and petunias she so carefully cultivated, was thick with the dust of desecration. The noise was deafening now, a frantic rhythmic pounding that seemed to mock the very concept of a peaceful Tuesday. She marched to the high, bougainvillea-covered wall that separated her property from number 12. Standing on her tiptoes, she peered over, and then she saw it. It wasn't just the source of the noise, a team of laborers swarming over a chaotic construction site where a pristine lawn used to be. It was the structure they were erecting. A bizarre, asymmetrical, pod-like building, all sharp angles and curved surfaces, was rising from a concrete foundation. It looked like a fallen spaceship, or perhaps a giant, misshapen piece of fruit. And its color was an act of pure aesthetic terrorism. It was a shade of fuchsia so loud, so violently cheerful, that it made her eyes water. It clashed with the gentle beiges, the tasteful terracottas, and the dignified whites that were the Society's mandated color palette. It was an aberration. A fluorescent middle finger pointed directly at the heart of Guliarana Gardens. A cold, familiar fury began to build in her chest. This was a flagrant violation of Bylaw 17B, on the maintenance of external aesthetic harmony. She had written that bylaw herself. After Brigadier Salim's widow had tried to paint her water tank to look like a giant watermelon, Anila had spent weeks crafting the precise language, specifying acceptable Pantone color codes, ensuring that personal whimsy would never again threaten the collective dignity of their community. She retreated from the wall, her mind a whirlwind of clauses and subclauses. This wasn't just about a color. It was about principle. It was about the slow erosion of standards, the slippery slope that began with a fuchsia pod and ended in chaos, loud parties, untrimmed hedges, cars parked haphazardly on the street. It was the very thing she and her late husband, Brigadier Saqib Khan, had sought to escape when they moved here from the cantonment. They had envisioned a haven of discipline and decorum, a civilian posting managed with military precision. After his passing, maintaining that vision was all she had left. It was her duty, her purpose. Backed inside, she bypassed the telephone. This demanded a more formal approach. She marched to her study, a room that mirrored her mind, everything in its place. She pulled a heavy, leather-bound volume from the shelf. Guliarana Gardens Housing Society, Articles of Association and Community Bylaws, Revised Edition 2021, her magnum opus. She ran a loving hand over the gold-embossed title before opening it to the flagged page. There it was, in crisp, black ink. Bylaw 17B, all external structures, including but not limited to gazebos, sheds, and extensions, must receive prior written approval from the Residence Committee. Architectural plans and a list of proposed materials and color palettes selected from the approved Society spectrum. Appendix C must be submitted no less than 45 days before the commencement of any work. There were no loopholes, no ambiguities. It was perfect. Armed with the book, she knew what she had to do. She would not be the screeching neighbor, the hysterical auntie. She would be the voice of reason, the embodiment of the law. She would walk over there, present the facts, and expect immediate compliance. It was the only logical outcome. She smoothed down her crisp cotton camise, took a deep, steadying breath, and walked out her front door, the heavy book of rules clutched to her chest like a holy scripture. She strode across her lawn, through her gate, and up the driveway of number 12. The crunch of gravel under her sandals drowned out by the still-raging jackhammer. The front door was ajar. A young man with a man bun and a paint-splattered t-shirt was directing the laborers. He looked harried and stressed. Excuse me, Mrs. Khan said, her voice clear and firm, cutting through the din with practiced authority. The jackhammer sputtered and died, plunging the world into a shocking, ringing silence. The young man turned. Yes, Auntie, he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. I am Mrs. Anila Khan, from number 11, she began, her tone formal. I am the chairperson of the residence committee. I believe you are the new owner. Saad Rizwan, he said, offering a tired but friendly smile. Yes, that's us. Sorry for all the racket. Just trying to get my wife's studio set up as quickly as possible. Your wife's studio, Mrs. Khan repeated, the words tasting like ash. I see. And did you, by any chance, submit your architectural plans and color palette selections to the committee for approval, as stipulated in the society bylaws? Saad's friendly expression faltered. He blinked. The what? Bylaw? Mean that big book the estate agent gave us. Haven't really had a chance to go through it, to be honest. It's been a crazy move. I see, Mrs. Khan said, her voice dropping a full octave. She opened her own copy of the book to the bookmarked page. Allow me to enlighten you. Bylaw 17b, on the maintenance of external aesthetic harmony, states quite clearly that no external structure may be erected without prior written consent from the committee. Just then, the woman with the pink hair emerged from the house, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. She was beautiful, in a chaotic, artistic way that set Mrs. Khan's teeth on edge. Saadi, who's this? She chirped, her eyes bright and curious. This is Mrs. Khan from next door, Zara, Saad said, looking increasingly uncomfortable. She's from the committee. Oh, hello, Zara said, her smile wide and genuine. So lovely to finally meet you. We're the Rizwans. Would you like some lemonade? You must be boiling in this heat. She gestured towards Mrs. Khan's formal attire. The offer of lemonade, the casual friendliness, the utter lack of comprehension in their eyes, it was infuriating. They were treating this like a social call, a minor misunderstanding. They didn't grasp the gravity of their transgression. Thank you. No, Mrs. Khan said stiffly. What I would like is for this unauthorized construction to cease immediately. Saad and Zara exchanged a look. It was a fleeting glance, but it contained a universe of shared amusement that did not escape Mrs. Khan. Cease. Saad chuckled nervously. Auntie, we can't just stop. We've paid the contractor a non-refundable deposit. The materials are all here. Look, I'm really sorry. We'll fill out the paperwork this evening. I'm sure it's just a formality, right? A formality. Mrs. Khan's composure finally cracked. Just a little. The velvet was wearing thin. The bylaws of Gulirana Gardens are not a formality, Mr. Rizwan. They are the very foundation of our community. That thing, she gestured with a trembling hand towards the fuchsia monstrosity, is a violation, and it will not be permitted. Zara's smile finally faded. She put the lemonade glasses down on a stack of cement bags. With all due respect, Mrs. Khan, she said, her voice losing its cheerful lilt. It's our property. We paid a fortune for it. It's an art studio. For my work, the color is meant to be inspiring. Your inspiration is a breach of contract. Mrs. Khan snapped, her face flushed. You signed the purchase agreement, which legally binds you to all society articles and bylaws. This is not a debate. Saad stepped forward, trying to play the mediator. Okay, look, let's not get heated. Mrs. Khan, may I call you Anila Auntie? We are new here. We made a mistake, a genuine mistake. We will submit the forms, but the work has to continue. We are on a schedule. Please, can you not make an exception? Just this. Once Anila Auntie, the name hung in the air, a forced, cloying term of familiarity. It was a classic tactic to infantilize the opposition, soften them up with a veneer of respect, while completely ignoring the substance of their argument. It was a weapon of the sea. The emergency meeting of the residence committee was not held in the sterile, impersonal community hall. It was held, as all truly critical matters were, in Mrs. Anila Khan's drawing room. The venue itself was a power play. To be summoned, here was to be reminded of the gold standard of Gulirana living. The air was cool, smelling faintly of lemon polish and old books. Samosas and mint chutney, prepared by her long-serving cook, were arranged on a silver platter with geometric precision. It was a civilized setting for a declaration of war. Major Iqbal, retired, sat bolt upright on a hard-backed chair, his back refusing to touch the upholstery as if in protest against comfort itself. His formidable mustache, a relic of his cavalry, days bristled with indignation. A fuchsia pod, you say, Anila? He boomed, his voice accustomed to addressing entire regiments. Preposterous. In my day, a stunt like that would earn you a week in the quarter guard. Mr. Asef, the committee secretary, a man whose spine seemed to have dissolved years ago, perched nervously on the edge of the sofa. He scribbled furiously in his notepad, his pen scratching loudly in the tense silence. Violation of 17b, noted. Unapproved color palette, noted. Lack of prior submission, dear me. The dissenting vote, as always, was Mrs. Farhade, a kind, plump woman whose primary concerns were stray cats and the annual flower show. She wrung her hands. But Anila, are we sure a legal notice is the first step? They're so young, you know. How this new generation is all impulse, no planning. My own nephew tried to start a podcast in his garage. Perhaps if we just invite them for tea, explain things gently. Anila fixed her with a look that could freeze jam. Farhate, we are past the point of gentle explanations. I went there myself. I was met with charming ignorance and a complete refusal to comply. They called me auntie while actively undermining the legal framework of this society. She gestured around the room. This order, this piece is not an accident. It is the result of vigilance. If we grant an exception for a fuchsia pod today, tomorrow Mr. Bhatti in number 7 will want to raise chickens for organic eggs. And the teenagers in the corner plot will decide the park is a perfect spot for a late-night rave. Precedent is everything. Major Iqbal slammed a fist on the arm of his chair. She's right, a line must be drawn. Give them an inch, they'll build a multi-story plaza. Issue the notice. Full legal weight behind it. 24 hours to comply. Or the fines begin. 1,000 rupees a day. 5,000. Anila corrected him calmly. The fines were revised in the 2023 addendum. After the incident with the inflatable swimming pool at number 16, Mr. Asif paled, scribbling even faster. 5,000, yes, of course. Mrs. Farhite sighed, defeated by the combined force of military zeal and bureaucratic certitude. Very well, but I do hope it doesn't create any unpleasantness. Unpleasantness, Anila said, her voice dangerously soft. Is a fuchsia pod visible from my bedroom window? This is merely the restoration of order. The motion was passed. The die was cast. Within 3 hours, the notice was drafted by their lawyer, a man who specialized in the vicious, pedantic warfare of housing society disputes, and printed on imposing legal-sized paper. Anila watched from her upstairs window, as a uniformed security guard marched stiffly up the Rizwan's driveway and handed the white envelope to Saad. She couldn't hear their words, but she could see the jaunty confidence drain from Saad's posture as he read the document. He passed it to Zara, who had come out to join him. Her pink hair seemed to droop as her eyes scanned the page. They looked up, not at the guard, but directly at Anila's house, their expressions a mixture of shock and betrayal. Anila stepped back from the window, a grim satisfaction settling over her. The first volley had been fired, and it had hit its mark. She expected a phone call, an apology, a visit from a chastened young couple, ready to surrender. What she did not expect was the text message that pinged on the committee's WhatsApp group that afternoon. It was from Mrs. Farhate. The new couple in No 12 are hosting a Meet the Neighbors tea on their lawn this evening at 5 p.m. Such a wonderful initiative to foster community spirit. We should all go and welcome them properly. Anila stared at the message, her blood turning to ice. A tea party? It was brilliant. It was insidious. They were ignoring the legal threat and launching a counteroffensive on the social front. They were bypassing her authority, circumventing the committee, and appealing directly to the populace. They would win hearts and minds with complimentary shami kebabs and effusive charm, while their illegal fuchsia monstrosity loomed in the background, a silent testament to their defiance. The construction had paused. The legal letter had at least achieved that, but this was a declaration that they had no intention of dismantling it. This will not stand, she whispered to the empty room. At 4:55 p.m., Anila Khan did something she hadn't done in years. She prepared for social combat. She donned a starched, imposing silk sari, draped it with military precision, and marched out of her house. As she approached number 12, the scene was worse than she had imagined. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered on the lawn. Soft, trendy music played from a portable speaker. Zara, looking effortlessly chic in a flowing tunic, was laughing with Mrs. Farhite, while Saad was charming Mr. Bhatti from number 7, the man Anila had just used as a hypothetical chicken farmer. They had created an oasis of bonhomie right on the battlefield. Her arrival caused a palpable ripple in the atmosphere. The laughter subsided. Conversations faltered. It was as if a school principal had just walked into a student common room. Zara saw her first. Her bright smile didn't waver, but her eyes held a new, steely glint. Mrs. Khan, we are so honored you could make it, she called out, her voice projecting for all to hear. We were just so devastated by that scary letter. We thought the best thing to do was to meet all our wonderful neighbors and show you we're not the monsters the paperwork makes us out to be. It was a masterful stroke, painting Anila as the villainous bureaucrat terrorizing the cheerful newcomers. Anila walked calmly towards her, the eyes of the entire street on her. It is admirable that you wish to meet your neighbors, Mrs. Rizwan, Anila replied, her voice cool and measured, yet carrying to every corner of the lawn. Most new residents, however, choose to do so before they break the society's legally binding covenants and receive a formal notice to cease and desist. A collective gasp went through the small crowd. Mrs. Farhate looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. Saad rushed forward, his face flushed. Auntie, please, this was meant to be a friendly get-together. I am sure it was, Anila said, not taking her eyes off Zara. But friendship and the rule of law are two very different things. The notice stands. The fines begin tomorrow at 9 a.m. The party was effectively over. The cheerful atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by a thick, awkward tension. Neighbors started making their excuses, mumbling goodbyes and melting away, not wanting to be caught in the crossfire soon. It was just Anila, the two Rizwans, a stone-faced Major Iqbal, who had appeared silently at her flank, and a mortified Mrs. Farhate, feeling she had successfully reasserted her authority and quelled the rebellion. Anila gave a stiff, final nod. I trust we have an understanding now. She turned to leave, her victory feeling crisp and clean. We do, Zara said softly from behind her. Anila paused, her hand on the gate. There was something in Zara's tone, not defeat, but a chilling sort of calm. We understand perfectly, Zara continued, stepping forward. Saad put a restraining hand on her arm, but she shook it off. So we did a little reading this afternoon, not in the Society's little rulebook, but downtown. At the City Development Authority archives. It's fascinating what you can find in public records. You know, Anila's back remained to them, but she stood frozen. Major Iqbal shifted his weight, sensing a change in tactics. For instance, Zara's voice was as sweet as poison. We found the original land demarcation surveys for Gulirana Gardens from 1988, the official blueprints. It's all about property lines, plot measurements, and right-of-way. Very, very precise. A knot of pure dread began to form in Anila's stomach. Zara took another step closer. And according to the city's official map, the boundary wall between number 11 and number 12, your lovely bougainvillea-covered wall, Mrs. Khan, is off by almost 2 feet. It's on our property, as is about half of your prized rose garden. She let the words hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final, devastating blow. I suppose that makes it an unauthorized structure, doesn't it? I wonder what the bylaw is for that. The 10-second walk from the Rizwan's gate back to her own was the longest journey of Anila Khan's life. Each step on the familiar flagstones felt uncertain, as if the very ground beneath her had lost its integrity. Zara's words echoed in her mind, a devastating fusillade that had bypassed all her defenses and struck the very foundation of her authority. The wall is on our property. Major Iqbal, striding beside her, sputtered with loyal denial. A bluff, Anila, a cheap shot. The girl is a viper. We will hire our own surveyor. We will counter-sue for slander. Anila said nothing. Her face was a granite mask, but behind it, a frantic calculation was taking place. She remembered the day the wall was built, 30 years ago. Her husband, Brigadier Saqib, a man who measured his life in right angles and straight lines, had personally supervised the masons. He had stood with the blueprints, his boots planted firmly in the dirt, ensuring every brick was laid with military precision. Could he have been wrong? The thought felt like a betrayal. To question the wall was to question him, to admit a flaw. In the perfect, ordered world he had built for her, she entered her house, the cool, polished interior offering no comfort. The drawing room, the stage for her recent victory, now felt mockingly silent. She walked to the window that overlooked the garden, her garden. She saw the climbing bougainvillea, a riot of deep magenta she had always loved, clinging to the accused, while she saw her prize-winning roses, their delicate heads nodding in the breeze, unknowingly blooming on enemy soil. Zara hadn't just threatened her property, she had threatened her history, turning a symbol of security into a monument of hypocrisy. For a moment, the iron control wavered. A tremor ran through her hand as she reached out to steady herself on the windowsill. The fuchsia pod next door seemed a distant, almost comical problem now. This was an attack on her own legitimacy. The Queen, she realized with a sickening lurch, was in check. Sleep that night was a foreign country. She lay awake, staring into the darkness, the silence of the house amplifying the turmoil in her mind. A memory surfaced, vivid and bittersweet. Saqib, his uniform traded for a simple kurta, kneeling in the soft earth, planting the first rosebush along the newly built wall. He had smiled at her, his hands smudged with soil. A fortress of beauty, Anila, he had said. Our own perfect, ordered world, with no room for chaos. The memory brought, not comfort, but a fresh wave of cold fury. The Rizwans hadn't just found a loophole, they had taken her husband's legacy and twisted it into a weapon against her. They were fighting. Dirty? Very well. She could too. She rose before dawn, her exhaustion burned away by a new, chilling resolve. Her frontal assault on the fuchsia pod was now untenable. If she pushed for its demolition, they would publicly expose her own violation, shattering her authority and turning her into a laughingstock. She would be the auntie who preached the law while breaking it. She needed a new weapon. Something that couldn't be deflected by charm or counteraccusation. She needed leverage. By the time the sun cast its first rays over the still silent construction site next door, Anila was no longer a committee chairperson. She was a reconnaissance officer, binoculars in hand, a tool she hadn't used since a birdwatching phase 20 years prior. She scanned number 12 from her upstairs study. She ignored the pod. She was looking for a different kind of weakness. The workers began to arrive, their chatter breaking the morning calm. A small, rusty Suzuki pickup, belching a cloud of black smoke, delivered a load of sand. Her eyes narrowed. Commercial deliveries. She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen with uncharacteristic speed. She found Zara Rizwan's Instagram page. It was a vibrant, messy collage of a life lived out loud. Pictures of pottery, videos of her working a potter's wheel, and posts advertising her latest collection of ceramic mugs. DM to order. The bio read, worldwide shipping available. Anila's heart began to beat a little faster. This wasn't a hobby. This was a business. A home-based manufacturing and retail operation. She put down the binoculars and turned to her bookshelf. Pulling out the leather-bound bylaw book, she bypassed the familiar territory of aesthetics and construction, her fingers flipping past by 17b. She was hunting in a different section now, zoning and land use, and there it was. Bylaw 24c, prohibition of commercial enterprise. All plots within Gulirana Gardens are designated strictly for single-family residential use. No plot or residence shall be used for any commercial, manufacturing, or retail purpose that involves regular commercial deliveries, non-resident client traffic, or the use of industrial-grade machinery. There were exceptions, of course, for quiet home offices or remote work. But a pottery studio with a kill witch would require a heavy-duty electrical line deliveries of clay and packing materials. And an online storefront was not a home office. It was a small-scale factory. It was an unambiguous, undeniable, and deeply unpopular type of violation. No one wanted their peaceful residential street turned into a commercial zone. This was it. This was the leverage she needed. It had nothing to do with taste or color. It was a clean, surgical strike at the core of their operation. Just as a grim smile touched her lips, her phone rang. It was Mr. Salim, the retired surveyor, her husband's old friend whom she had called at dawn. His voice was heavy with reluctance. Anila Begum Salam, he began. I have the official schematics from the CDA archives, the 1988 master plan. And Anila asked, her voice tight. There was a pause. She could hear the rustle of paper. I also took a quick laser measurement from the official survey marker on the main road, just to be sure. He sighed. And Anila Begum, the young woman at number 12 was right. The words landed like physical blows. Anila sank into her chair. In fact, Mr. Salim continued, his voice full of apology, she was being generous. Your wall. It encroaches on their property by almost 3 feet at the northern end. 3 feet, an entire swath of her garden, an entire foundation of her moral authority, gone. She felt a profound, dizzying sense of defeat. Her fortress had not just been breached, it had been built on a lie. Her husband, the man of precision, had made a mistake. A 3-foot mistake. She ended the call without another word. The truth was a bitter pill. For a long, silent moment, she stared at the wall through her window, the symbol of her shame. The fight was over. She had lost. But then, her gaze drifted from the window to the bylaw book lying open on her desk, open to bylaw 24c. The pain, the humiliation, the grief for her husband's tarnished perfectionate, all began to curdle, transmuting from despair into something else. Something hard, cold, and diamond-sharp rage. They had brought this battle to her doorstep. They had used the rules as a weapon. Now, she would do the same. This was no longer about a fuchsia pod or a misplaced wall. It was about survival. She picked up her phone. Her fingers scrolled past the numbers for the committee members and the society lawyer. She stopped at a different name, a contact she hadn't used in years. Mr. Chaudhry, a man with a mid-level but influential post at the Lahore Electric Supply Company, a man who owed Brigadier Saqib a significant favor. Anila pressed the call button. The war for Bylaw 17b was over. The war for Gulirana Gardens was about to enter a new, far more brutal phase. Mr. Chaudhry, Anila Khan here, she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. I need to report a suspected illegal commercial electricity connection being planned at a residential property. The day after Anila's call to Mr. Chowdhury was unnervingly quiet. The construction at number 12 remained dormant, the fuchsia pod a silent, garish monument to the stalemate. Anila spent the morning in her garden, ruthlessly pruning her roses, channeling her anxiety into each decisive snip of her shears. She felt a grim sense of anticipation. She had unleashed a golem, the slow, crushing, and utterly impersonal machinery of municipal bureaucracy. It was a force far greater than any residence committee, and it was now lumbering towards the Rizewans. The golem arrived at 11:30 a.m. It came not with a roar, but with the squeal of tortured brakes. A battered bright yellow pickup from the Lahore Electric Supply Company Lesco swerved to a stop directly in front of number 12. 4 men disembarked, 2 in grimy uniforms, and 2 in plainclothes, one of whom, a portly man with a comb-over and an air of profound self-importance, was clearly in charge. From her upstairs window, Anila watched, her heart a cold heavy stone in her chest. This was her doing. This was the consequence. The men, led by the portly subdivisional officer SDO, didn't knock. They pushed open the gate and marched onto the property, as if they owned it. Saad Rizwan came running out of the house, his expression one of bewildered alarm. "Excuse me, can I help you?" The SDO ignored him, his eyes scanning the mess of construction. He barked an order in Punjabi, and one of the technicians immediately began examining the new electrical conduits being laid towards the pod. "You are Saad Rizwan?" the SDO demanded, finally acknowledging him. "Yes, but what is this about?" "We have received a credible report of an attempt to install an illegal commercial connection at a domestic residence," the SDO announced, his voice booming across the lawn for any listening neighbors to hear. "You are drawing a 3-phase line for this factory." He waved a dismissive hand at the fuchsia pod. "It's not a factory, it's an art studio. For my wife," Saad stammered, completely out of his depth. "The electrician said we needed a stronger line for the kill." "A kill?" the SDO exclaimed with theatrical shock. "And do you have the Lesco permit for installation of industrial machinery, the approved commercial tariff application, the no objection certificate from the planning department?" He brandished a clipboard because there is no record of it here. The scene was a masterclass in bureaucratic intimidation. The Lesco team swarmed to site, speaking in rapid-fire technical jargon, pointing out violations, and shaking their heads with grave disapproval. Anila watched as the color drained from Saad's face. The charming, confident young man who had patronizingly called her auntie now looked like a frightened schoolboy in the principal's office. The raid concluded half an hour later. The SDO handed Saad an official-looking document, a stop-work order, for all electrical installations effective immediately. He also issued a summons for Saad to appear at the Lesco divisional office with a full explanation, leaving the threat of a massive fine for premeditated electricity theft hanging in the air. As the yellow van drove away, a small crowd of neighbors, drawn by the commotion, began whispering amongst themselves. Mrs. Farhate looked on with horror, while Major Iqbal, who had materialized on his veranda, gave Anila a subtle, approving nod across the gardens. The balance of power had shifted. The aftermath was immediate. The Rizwans were no longer social pariahs over a matter of taste. They were now the problem house that attracted government raids. The whispers in the society park changed from deep, "You see that awful pink thing?" to, "I heard they could be fined lakhs of rupees." Anila had successfully isolated them. Her own transgression, the misplaced wall, was forgotten. Eclipsed by the far more serious and public infraction she had engineered for them, she allowed herself a brief, cold moment of satisfaction. The Rizwans were now entangled in a bureaucratic web from which there was no easy escape. The endless corridors of the Lesco office, the dismissive clerks, the demand for forms that didn't exist, and stamps from officials who were perpetually on a tea break. It would drain their finances, their energy, and their will to fight over a boundary wall. But Anila had miscalculated. She had assumed her golem would stop where she had pointed it. She failed to account for the creature's own arbitrary, self-serving nature. 2 days later, the yellow van returned to Gularana Gardens. Anila saw it from her window and smiled. Perhaps they were returning to ensure compliance at number 12. But the van didn't stop there. It crawled down the street and stopped in front of Mr. Bodi's house. The Lesco team got out and began examining the wiring for his unauthorized deep well water pump. Anila's smile faltered. An hour later, the van moved again, this time stopping outside Major Iqbal's. They spent 20 minutes pointing at the military-grade floodlights the Major had installed. Lights that could illuminate a small stadium and were most certainly not on his approved load. A cold dread began to seep into Anila's veins. The SDO, likely to cover his tracks and justify the initial raid, had turned his credible report into a full-blown audit of the entire street. He was on a fishing expedition for fines, and everyone was fair game. She watched, frozen, as the van completed its inspection of the Major's house, turned around, and came to a slow, deliberate stop directly outside number 11. Directly outside her house. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The SDO and his team were walking up her driveway. Her driveway, Anila Khan, the guardian of the rules, was about to be inspected. She met them at the door, her expression a carefully constructed mask of polite inquiry. Yes. Is there a problem, officer? No problem, madame, the SDO said, a smug, knowing look in his eyes. He clearly knew who had made the initial complaint. Just a routine check. We are auditing the whole line. We need to inspect your meter box. It was a demand, not a request. She had no choice but to lead them to the side of the house, where the meter box was discreetly tucked away behind a jasmine bush. She felt a flicker of pride. Her house was perfect. The brigadier had seen to everything. The wiring was impeccable, the load well within limits. They would find nothing. One of the technicians, a wiry man with oil-stained hands, unlatched the metal box. He squinted at the old spinning disc meter. He looked at his clipboard, then back at the meter. He frowned, scraping away a fleck of dried paint from the meter's face with his thumbnail. What is it, Akram? The SDO asked, stepping closer. The technician, Akram, didn't answer immediately. He ran his finger over the small leaden seals on the meter casing. He looked up, not at his boss, but at Mrs. Khan. His expression was completely neutral, madam, he said, his voice flat. This meter, the serial number on the plate, does not match the one listed in our records for this address. Anila's blood ran cold. That's impossible. There must be a mistake in your records. Our records show, Akram continued, ignoring her protest and reading from his clipboard, that the meter registered to this address was replaced in 2005 with a digital unit. This one, he tapped the glass face of the spinning disc, was officially decommissioned and marked for disposal. He looked again at the lead seals, then shared a look with his S. And these seals, sir, they're not Lesko seals. The stamping is wrong. They're fake. The SDO's smug smile transformed into a predatory grin. He looked at Anila Khan, the grande dame of Gularana Gardens, the woman who had sixed him on her neighbors, and saw not a pillar of the community, but his next big catch. Well, madam, he said slowly, savoring the moment. It seems we have a much bigger problem here than a neighbor's pottery kill. Fake seals. A decommissioned meter. That's not just a fine. That's electricity theft. A criminal offense. For a long moment after the Lesko inspector's words landed, the world seemed to halt. The chirping of the sparrows, the distant hum of traffic, the very air in Anila Khan's lungs, it all froze. Fake seals, decommissioned meter, criminal offense. The words were alien, nonsensical. They could not possibly apply to her, to the house built by Brigadier Saqib Khan. That is a slanderous accusation, she said, her voice dangerously calm, though her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest. My husband was a man of unimpeachable integrity. There is a mistake in your records. The SDO, the portly officer, chuckled. It was a low, greasy sound that made Anila's skin crawl. Madam, the records are paper, but the meter is metal. And this metal tells a story about 20 years of unrecorded consumption. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. A story that ends with an FRI at the police station, public notices, and men in handcuffs. It gets very messy. Anila felt a dizzying wave of panic. She saw it all, her name in the newspapers, her face on the evening news. The whispers and stares of the entire city. The chairperson of the Gulirana Residence Committee, the bastion of law and order, arrested for common theft. The humiliation would be absolute. Her life's work, her husband's legacy, would be incinerated. Major Iqbal had arrived at her gate, his face thunderous. What is the meaning of this, Anila? What is this man saying? But the major's bluster was useless here. This wasn't a battle of wills he could win with a stern look. This was a different kind of war, fought in the grimy trenches of bureaucratic corruption, and Anila was unarmed. She looked at the SDO's greedy eyes and understood. He wasn't just enforcing the law. He was presenting an invoice. Her carefully constructed world of rules and principles had dissolved, leaving only the raw, ugly mechanics of power and money. And she, for the first time in her life, was on the wrong side of it. Her pride, the rigid spine of her existence, felt like a brittle stick. With an effort that cost her everything, she bent it. "Officer," she said, her voice barely a whisper, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. Such matters, I'm sure, can often be resolved without involving unnecessary paperwork. It would be a shame to trouble the police over what is clearly a clerical error from years ago." The SDO's predatory smile widened. He gestured for his technicians to inspect the jasmine bush further down the wall, giving them a moment of privacy. "A clerical error of this magnitude, madam," he murmured, "is very expensive to correct." He named a figure. It was an obscene amount, a number so large it stole the breath from her lungs. It was extortion, plain and simple. It was the price for her pride, the penalty for her attack on the rise wins, and a healthy profit margin all rolled into one. Mind reeled. But what choice did she have? The alternative was unthinkable. "Wait here," she commanded, her voice a dry rasp. She turned and walked back into her house, each step an agony of shame. Major Iqbal started to follow, protesting. "Anila, you can't be considering," but she waved him away with a sharp, dismissive gesture. Inside, she went to the brigadier's study, to the heavy steel safe hidden behind a portrait of the mausoleum. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled as she worked the combination. She pulled out stacks of emergency cash, money she hadn't touched in years. The crisp notes felt filthy in her hands. The walk back outside was a perp walk of her own making. She didn't look at the SDO as she handed him the thick, discreetly wrapped bundle. The brief touch of his hand as he took it felt like being steamed. He palmed it expertly, making it disappear into the pocket of his shalwar. "Ah, yes," he said loudly, for his men to hear. "Just as I thought. Akram, you were reading the wrong line in the ledger. A simple transposition of digits? Apologies for the disturbance, madame. Everything is perfectly in order here." He gave a sloppy salute and herded his men back into the yellow van. As it drove away, Anila stood frozen, the scent of jasmine and exhaust fumes mingling in the air. The whispers from the neighboring houses were now a roar in her ears. She had won, but she had lost everything. She retreated into the suffocating silence of her home. The drawing room felt alien, the furniture accusatory. She sank into a chair, the rigid control she had maintained for decades completely gone. She looked at the brigadier's photograph on the mantelpiece. The handsome, uniformed man with the clear, honest eyes. For the first time, a sliver of cold anger pierced through her grief. How could you? She thought. Was their perfect world, their fortress of beauty, built on a lie? Was the tampered meter, like the encroaching wall, another dirty little secret hidden behind a facade of order? The sun set, and she didn't turn on the lights, preferring to sit in the gathering gloom. She was adrift in the ruins of her own certainty. Just as darkness fully enveloped the room, the doorbell chimed, a sharp, intrusive sound. Her first instinct was to ignore it, but it chimed again, patient and insistent. With a heavy sigh, she went to the door. Standing on her doorstep, bathed in the glow of the porch light, was Saad Rizwan. He was alone. His face was not triumphant or smug, but serious and strangely calm. "Mrs. Khan," he said quietly, "we saw what happened today from our window." He paused. "We're sorry that happened to you." The simple, unexpected words of empathy disarmed her. She stared at him, speechless. This was the boy she had tried to ruin, the enemy she had tried to crush with the very forces that had just been turned on her. "My wife Sarah," he continued. "Her father is a lawyer, a very good one. He specializes in untangling bureaucratic complications. He knows how to deal with men like that SDO, to make sure they don't come back for a second helping." He took a small breath. He could also help with the boundary wall situation, file the right papers with the city, get it all regularized. Quietly, no fuss. It was a truce offering, a lifeline, but it was also a power play of breathtaking skill. He was offering to solve the very problem she had created for herself, positioning himself not as a victim, but as a potential savior. To accept would be to place herself in their debt, an unconditional surrender. "All we want is to build the studio, Mrs. Khan," he said, his voice earnest. "We just want to be left in peace, to build our home." He hesitated, then played his final, masterly card. Zara was thinking, maybe the fuchsia is a bit much. We saw a picture of a lovely terracotta in a magazine. It might look even better. He was offering her a way out, a way to save face. A compromise built on the ashes of her humiliation. The old Anila, the iron-willed queen of Guliarana, would have slammed the door. But that Anila was gone, her authority dissolved in a back-alley bribe. She looked at Saad, at his tired but hopeful face. She looked back into the darkness of her own home, a house built on secrets. The war had exhausted her. She cleared her throat. Her voice, when it came, was raspy and low, a stranger to her own ears. She did not say yes, she did not say no. She gave the only answer she could. Your wife, she said, her gaze unwavering. The color terracotta is listed as an approved shade in Appendix C of the bylaws, page 52. Saad Rizwan's offer hung in the air between them, a fragile bridge across a chasm of hostility. Anila looked at the young man on her doorstep, seeing him properly for the first time. He was not just a symbol of the chaos she abhorred. He was a husband fighting for his wife's dream, a homeowner cornered and pushed to fight back with the weapons he had. He was, she realized with a jolt, not so different from her. Her response, acknowledging the terracotta in the bylaw book, was a surrender cloaked in the language of her old authority. It was enough. Saad gave a slow, understanding nod, a silent acknowledgement of the white flag, and retreated to his own house. A few days later, Anila did something she had never done before. She invited her adversaries for tea. When Saad and Zara arrived, she received them in her drawing room. The silver tea service was still there, the samosas were still arranged in a perfect star, but the atmosphere was entirely different. The room was no longer a throne room or courtroom. It was, for the first time, simply a neighbor's home. Mr. Rizwan, Mrs. Rizwan, Anila began formally, pouring the tea with a steady hand. Thank you for coming. Thank you for having us, Mrs. Khan, Zara replied, her voice cautious but not unkind. There, over jasmine, tea and pastries, the treaty was drafted. It was a masterpiece of unspoken terms and face-saving gestures. Zara's father, the formidable lawyer, would never be seen or heard from directly. Instead, a series of bureaucratic miracles would occur. An application for the regularization of a minor historical boundary discrepancy would appear at the City Development Authority, fast-tracked by an unseen hand. A formal complaint against the Lesko SDO for harassment would be lodged by a concerned citizens group, leading to his swift and permanent transfer to a remote posting. In return, Anila would personally present the Rizwan's revised application for their studio to the Residence Committee. The fuchsia was gone, replaced by a respectable terracotta. The plans were flawless. As they finalized the details, Anila looked at Zara. The fuchsia, she said, the word feeling strange on her tongue. It was very important to your artistic vision. Are you truly content with terracotta? It was more than a question. It was an acknowledgement, an admission that she had failed to see past the color to the dream behind it. Zara met her gaze, a flicker of the old fire in her eyes, now tempered with wisdom. Sometimes, Mrs. Khan, she said softly, you have to paint over one thing to build something stronger underneath. The emergency committee meeting was tense. Major Iqbal was apoplectic, a compromised Anila. It is a surrender. They flouted our laws. We had them on the ropes after the Lesko incident. And what was the result of that incident? Major, Anila countered, her voice calm and firm. The entire street was audited. You yourself received a notice about your my house. She paused, forcing the words out, was also found to have irregularities. Waging war is a messy business. It creates casualties on all sides. The purpose of our bylaws is to ensure a peaceful community, not to win unconditional victories that leave behind bitterness and ruin. She had never spoken like this before. It was the language of a diplomat, not a drill sergeant. Mrs. Farhate was beaming, nodding enthusiastically. The other members, taken aback by this new, pragmatic Anila, looked from the Major's furious face to her resolute one. She had lost her aura of untouchability, but she had replaced it with something far more compelling. Wisdom. The terracotta pod was approved. The following week saw a new kind of activity on the street. At number 12, the construction resumed, but it was quieter, more respectful. The pod rose, and when the first coat of paint was applied, it was a warm, earthy terracotta that seemed to soak up the sunlight, complementing the green of the garden beautifully. At the same time, a more delicate operation took place at the boundary wall. A discreet team of city surveyors arrived. New marble property markers were quietly installed, 3 feet inside Anila's garden. The next day, Saad and Zara came over with shovels. Anila watched from her veranda as they, with their own hands, carefully dug up the 6 rose bush husbands' roses that now stood on their land. They didn't discard them. They painstakingly transplanted them to a new bed, while inside Anila's rightful property line. It was an act of grace that spoke louder than any apology. Weeks turned into a few months. The terracotta pod was finished, and the gentle, rhythmic hum of a potter's wheel occasionally drifted over the wall, a sound that was no more intrusive than the cooing of the doves. The new Lesko meter, installed by a polite and efficient team, spun silently. The peace in Guliarana Gardens was restored, but it was a different kind of peace. It was less pristine, perhaps, but more resilient. One afternoon, as Anila tended to her transplanted roses which were not just surviving, but thriving, Zara appeared at the wall. "A housewarming gift," she said, smiling, and passed a small, carefully wrapped package over to Anila. "For us, for our new beginning." Anila unwrapped it. It was a ceramic teacup, exquisitely crafted. The glaze was a deep, rich terracotta. She turned it in her hand, admiring the workmanship. Then she looked inside. At the bottom of the cup, visible only when it was empty or held up to the light, was a single, perfect, defiantly fuchsia flower. A small, knowing smile touched Anila's lips. It was a secret signature, a reminder of the war, a testament to the chaos that now lay hidden beneath the surface of their new, hard-won order. Later, Anila sat on her veranda, sipping tea from her new cup. Her world was no longer perfect, but it felt whole. She looked at her garden, at the terracotta studio next door, at the peaceful street. She had changed. She had been defeated, humbled, and in the process, had become a better leader. Her phone buzzed with a notification from the residents' WhatsApp group. It was a message from Mrs. Farhate, punctuated with her usual flurry of worried emojis. "Oh dear. Has anyone seen the new people moving into number 24, the old Salim house? They arrived this morning. I think one of them is a musician. I just saw them unload a full drum kit, and they have 2 very large dogs that were barking at everyone. What should we do?" Anila read the message. A year ago, her blood would have boiled. She would have been on her feet, bylaw book in hand, marching towards the source of the new disturbance. But now, she just sat there. She looked at the terracotta pod next door. She took a slow, deliberate sip of tea, the hidden fuchsia flower at the bottom of her cup brushing her lips. She thought of rules, and she thought of exceptions. She thought of walls, and she thought of bridges. She lowered her cup, her expression thoughtful, unreadable. She did not type a response. The battle for the fuchsia pod was over, but the story of Guliarana Gardens and its formidable chairperson was far from finished.